They say hindsight is 20/20, but what if you were blind to the truth for 20 years? What if the person you trusted most wasn't who you thought they were? My story isn't about redemption. It's not about forgiveness or second chances. It's a cautionary tale, a warning to anyone who thinks betrayal could never happen to them. The woman I had loved for 20 years wasn't the woman I thought she was. I discovered this not too long ago, and it ended everything. Our marriage, and the life I thought we shared. For 20 years, I thought I had it all. From the outside, our lives probably looked ideal. 2 kids thriving in college, a stable home, and a marriage people might have envied. But let me tell you something, a smiling photo can hide a lot. I didn't know it then, but we were more like housemates than partners toward the end. It was subtle, though, like a storm that builds so slowly, you don't notice it until it's overhead. But looking back now, I see the signs were always there. It's easy to ignore these things when you don't want to see them. You convince yourself that they're just small bumps in the road. But what I didn't realize then was that those small bumps were leading to something much bigger, something I wasn't ready for. The day I found the journal started out like any other. I was at home, clearing out some paperwork for our tax returns, boring, mundane stuff. I was looking for a file, and I was sure we kept it in the dresser in our bedroom. You know how it is. Each of us had our own territory in the house. Her side of the dresser was hers, and I rarely, if ever, had a reason to rummage through it. But that day, I needed that file. As I pulled open one of the drawers, there it was, a small leather-bound book, buried under a stack of scarves and papers. I picked it up, thinking it was some sort of planner, but then I saw her handwriting. It was her journal. I remember standing there, holding it, like I already knew this was something I wasn't meant to see. Part of me wanted to put it back, to act like I hadn't found it at all. But another part, driven by curiosity and the age-worn look of the journal, couldn't help but wonder what she had been writing in it all these years. After 20 years, I thought, what secrets could she possibly have that I don't already know? The moment I opened that journal, my entire world changed. It wasn't just the first line that hit me, it was every line after that. The entries weren't random musings or casual reflections. They were raw, detailed accounts of her affair. And not just with anyone, but with someone we both knew, a close family friend. She described the way her lover made her feel, how he brought excitement back into her life, how she felt alive in ways she hadn't in years. One line burned into my memory, like a scar I couldn't erase. He makes me feel alive in ways my husband never could. I kept reading, hoping that somehow I was misunderstanding, but it only got worse. I don't know how much longer I can keep living this double life, she wrote. He's pressuring me to leave, and maybe he's right. I've spent years pretending to be happy when I'm not. I can't explain what it feels like to read something like that. My vision blurred, not because I was crying, but because my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. For 20 years, I thought we were partners, building a life together. But in her own words, she was living a lie. I felt numb, as if my body had shut down to protect me from the full weight of what I had just learned. That evening, I sat at the dining table, the journal in front of me. When she walked in, I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing like it had been shoved into overdrive. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the journal. Her eyes flicked to it, but she recovered quickly, her tone sharp, almost defensive. "Why are you going through my things?" she asked, her voice laced with accusation, as if that was the real crime here. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I opened the journal to a random page, one I had seen earlier, and began to read aloud. Her lover's name, the intimate details of their meetings, the words she had written about how alive he made her feel. My voice wavered, but I kept going. Every word cut deeper than the last, not just because of what they meant, but because they were hers. Words I thought she saved for me. "Stop," she finally said, her voice trembling now. Her hands gripped the back of the chair in front of her, and for the first time, I noticed how pale she'd gone. I closed the journal and looked her straight in the eye. "Is it true?" I asked. All of it. My voice was barely a whisper, but it felt like the loudest thing in the room. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sank into the chair across from me, her face in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet. "Yes," she said. "It's true." What followed wasn't an apology. It wasn't even remorse. Instead, it was like a dam broke, and every unspoken resentment she'd been holding back came pouring out. She admitted to the affair, yes, but what shook me more was how long it had been going on. Years. Years of lies, sneaking around, and betrayal. "He's been asking me to leave," she said, her voice steadier now, even as I sat there feeling like my world was collapsing. "He thinks we'd be happier together." Then she looked at me, her eyes cold, almost accusing. "Do you really think I've been happy all these years? You were so focused on your career, so busy being a provider, that you didn't even notice me slipping away." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I'd always thought I was doing the right thing, putting in long hours, and making sure the bills were paid, and the kids were taken care of. But in her eyes, it wasn't enough. No, it wasn't that. It was never about that. I wasn't enough. I couldn't bring myself to respond right away. My thoughts were a mess, a jumble of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could she sit there and tell me our marriage had been crumbling for years while I had no idea? I wasn't just her second choice, I was her safety net. A backup plan for when things didn't work out with him. "Why didn't you just leave?" I finally managed to ask, my voice cracking. "If I wasn't what you wanted, why not just go?" Her response was like another dagger to the chest. "Because it was easier to stay," she said. "I didn't want to blow up our family, and I didn't think you'd find out." She shrugged, as if that made it all better, as if that justified everything she'd done. I stared at her, unable to believe the person in front of me was the same woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with for 2 decades. The way she spoke about our marriage, like it was a prison sentence she'd been quietly serving until something better came along. The next morning, I woke up after what felt like the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd read in her journal and everything she'd said the night before. It wasn't just the betrayal that broke me. It was the realization that she didn't even regret it. She'd chosen someone else a long time ago. I was just the last to find out. I knew I couldn't stay in that house another day pretending everything was fine. I couldn't look her in the eye, knowing that the love I'd been holding on to all these years wasn't real. Not for her, at least. So, I got dressed, skipped breakfast, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. The drive there felt surreal, like I was on autopilot. My hands were steady, but my heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. Filing for divorce after 20 years of marriage isn't a decision you take lightly. It's not something you can prepare for. But how do you repair something that was never real to begin with? I kept asking myself that question as I signed the paperwork. The lawyer gave me the usual spiel about the next steps, but I could barely hear him. All I could think about was how everything had led to this moment, and how I never saw it coming. Breaking the news to our kids was harder than filing the divorce papers. They're both in college, grown enough to understand, but not grown enough to shield their hearts from this kind of pain. I called them both to come home that weekend, and when they arrived, I sat them down in the living room. Their mother was there too, sitting on the opposite end of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She couldn't even look at them. I told them everything. Not in detail, they didn't need to know all the messy parts, but enough for them to understand why this was happening. I explained that their mother had been unfaithful, and that it wasn't a mistake or a one-time thing. It was a choice she'd made over and over again, and I couldn't live with that anymore. My son, who's 20, clenched his fists. He looked at her and said, "How could you do this to Dad? After everything he's done for us?" My daughter, who's 18, started crying. She kept saying, "I don't understand. Why would you do this?" Their mother stayed silent, staring at the floor as if saying nothing would somehow make it better. I told them it was okay to feel angry, hurt, or even confused. I told them they didn't have to pick sides, but I also promised them that I would always be there for them, no matter what. That seemed to calm them down a little, but the damage was already done. Watching their faces crumble like that, it was like seeing my own heartbreak reflected in theirs. Walking away from a 20-year marriage is hard. Telling your kids that their family is breaking apart is harder. But what's impossible is staying in a relationship that's built on lies. I didn't deserve to live in the shadow of betrayal, and my kids deserve to know the truth. It wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about finally standing up for myself. When the divorce proceedings began, I thought the worst was already behind me. But I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. It started with a simple review of our financial records, something I'd always left to her. She had always been better at handling the day-to-day accounts, and I trusted her with everything. But as my lawyer and I went through the documents, trying to untangle our assets, things weren't adding up. There were large withdrawals, thousands of dollars, that I couldn't explain. Payments for luxury items that had never made their way into our home. Jewelry, designer handbags, hotel bookings, and even transfers to an account I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it might have been some mistake. Maybe I had missed something over the years. But when we dug deeper, the truth hit me like a freight train. She hadn't just been spending recklessly. She had been funding him, her lover. I found out she had been paying for his rent, his car, and even the holidays they took together while I was busy working to provide for our family. I had been breaking my back to secure a future for us, for our kids, while she was siphoning money from our account to live a double life. I can't describe the feeling of betrayal at that moment. It wasn't just my heart she had broken. She had taken my trust, my hard-earned savings, and my dreams for our future, and used them to build a life with someone else. A life I never knew existed. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this happening under my nose? How many times had I brushed off her strange behavior, her sudden need for expensive gifts, or her claims that money was tight? I thought she was just indulging herself occasionally. I never imagined she was indulging him. The more I uncovered, the more the pain grew. Every dollar she took was another lie she told, another choice she made to prioritize her affair over our family. It made me question everything. How could I have been so blind, so naive? As I sat there, staring at the evidence, I realized that this betrayal was deeper than the affair. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder how I missed all the signs. The truth is, I trusted her blindly. I thought that was enough. But trust without awareness is like driving with your eyes closed. You're just waiting for a crash. I got so comfortable in our routine that I didn't notice how far apart we'd drifted until it was too late. And that's what hurts the most. Not just that she betrayed me, but that I let myself be so blind to it. If there's one thing I've learned through this, it's that love isn't just about trust. It's about paying attention. Don't take your spouse for granted. Don't assume they'll always be there just because they've always been. Pay attention to the small changes, the little silences, the unspoken words, the moments where something feels off. It's easy to dismiss those things, to tell yourself you're imagining it. But that's where cracks start to form. Talk to each other. Really talk. Not just about bills and schedules and what's for dinner, but about how you're feeling and what's on your mind. And listen even when it's hard. Even when you're afraid of what you might hear. Because the worst pain isn't hearing the truth. It's realizing you ignored it for years and now it's too late to fix. Marriage isn't safe from challenges just because you love each other. It takes work, awareness, and honesty. If you don't put in that effort, you might wake up one day like I did, wondering how the person you loved became a stranger. I've lost a 20-year marriage. I've lost my faith in love, in trust, and honestly in myself. It's a strange feeling to realize the life you built wasn't what you thought it was. There's regret, anger, sadness. All of it tangled up into this weight I carry every day. But if sharing my story helps even one person see what I couldn't, if it makes someone look a little closer at their own relationship or have that hard conversation they've been avoiding, then maybe all of this pain wasn't for nothing. I can't change what happened to me, but maybe I can stop it from happening to someone else.